The story begins with a man named Takumi, as he's surrounded by a pack of wolves. He checks their stats, realizing they're rank C monsters, and they suddenly attack him, but he shoots them with his air bullets, taking them out instantly. He loots their corpses, as he recalls that he used to live an ordinary life in Japan, but one day, he suddenly found himself in a strange room, where a man begs for his forgiveness. He has no idea what's happening, so the man introduces himself as Sephiroth, saying he's a god, and he mentions that they're in the divine land. Takumi thinks he's about to get scammed, but Sephiroth denies this, as he reveals that he can read minds. He explains that he was trying to repair the space-time continuum, but he made a mistake, which accidentally killed Takumi. So to make amends, Sephiroth created a new body for him, and reincarnated him into the world of Ateldia. He realizes that his body is equipped with the knowledge he needs to survive, and he checks his stats, realizing he's at level 3. He suddenly hears something approaching, and he sees a boy and a girl, thinking they got lost. So he asks them about their parents, but they're afraid of him, and he hears their stomachs growling, so he thinks they must be hungry. He takes food from his inventory, telling them to eat it, so they taste it, and he realizes that their clothes are in terrible condition. He sees clothes in his inventory, so he makes them wear it, and he asks them if they want to join him, telling them about his plan to leave the forest. But they remain silent, so he decides to use his appraisal skill to learn about them, and he learns that they're both 5 years old, but they have no names. So he decides to name the boy Alan, and the girl Elena, telling them to follow him. As they venture through the forest, Takumi thinks about taking a break, because he doesn't want the kids to get tired. But they suddenly charge in, as a group of monsters appear. He's worried that the monsters might kill them, so he thinks about firing his air bullets, but he's afraid that he might hit them. But they wipe the floor with the monsters, and he can't believe this, realizing they're extremely powerful. He asks them if they sense the monsters approaching, and they confirm this, so he tells them to tell him before running ahead. They head deeper into the forest, and they encounter monsters along the way, but the kids deal with them, and Takumi tells them they're doing a great job. Later that day, Takumi realizes it's time for dinner, so they start a campfire, and they have a meal together, as he notes that the kids are happy, so he thinks they're warming up to him. The next day, they arrive in a city, and Takumi tells the guards that they passed through the forest of Gaia, but they find this difficult to believe, because only the best adventurers can survive in the forest. He tells them that he just gathered medicinal herbs, so he didn't go far, and the guards believe him. But they ask for his identity card, saying he needs it to enter the city, but he explains that he doesn't have one, because he's from a remote village. So the guards decide to screen him, and one of them tells him to hold a crystal ball. He obeys the instruction, knowing it searches for criminal records, so he wonders if the kids are going to be okay, because he doesn't know where they came from. The guard realizes they're all clear, so he gives them temporary identity cards, telling them to get an ID at the guild if they're planning to stay in the city. They look around the city, but Takumi realizes that the kids are afraid of strangers, and he heads to a chapel, where he starts praying to Sephiroth. So he appears before Takumi, asking him about his life in Ateldia, and he tells Sephiroth about the kids, saying he's planning to take them to an orphanage. But Sephiroth tells him not to do it, and he realizes that Sephiroth planned everything out, saying it was strange that the kids just randomly appeared in the forest. Sephiroth asks for his forgiveness, but he just wants to learn about the kids, and Sephiroth explains that he can't tell him everything. He knows that there are 5 gods in the world, and 4 of them represent the elements of nature, and their leader is the creator named Marianola. Sephiroth is the god of wind, and Takumi thinks he can't say anything because the other gods are involved, and he confirms this, saying the kids are special and it was dangerous to leave them in the forest. Takumi decides to take care of them, saying he was never planning on taking them to an orphanage, and he tells them they're going to find a place to stay. They spend the night in an inn, where the kids play on a bed, and they eventually fall asleep. The next day, Takumi wakes up, and the kids greet him as he realizes that they can now talk. So he becomes happy because they're making progress. They visit the Adventurers Guild, where they meet the receptionist named Luna, and Takumi tells her he wants to register with the kids. So she tells him to fill up the registration form, and she gives them their guild cards, saying it can be used as an ID. He realizes he's already at level 11, and she tells him about the guild, saying the newcomers begin at F rank, and they can climb all the way up to S rank. She mentions that there's also an SS rank, but there are no adventurers who have achieved that level, She explains that there's a party system for clearing quests, and the rank of the party depends on the average level of the members. To earn profit, the adventurers can accept quests from the guild, or sell the items dropped by monsters. Takumi wants to register a party, and she asks for his party's name, so he thinks about the kids, realizing they look like angels, so he decides to name their party as the White Wings. He checks out the quest board, and we learn that there are 3 types of quests. The hunting quest requires the adventurers to kill monsters, and the protection quest involves defending the objective. But he decides to pick a gathering quest, because they just need to collect herbs to complete the mission, thinking it's ideal for their first quest. He presents it to Luna, who gives them the mission, telling them they just need to gather 10 herbs of lily in 3 days. We see them searching around a forest, and they encounter a slime, but Takumi mentions that it's weak, so the kids play with it. He finds an herb of lily, and he shows it to the kids, teaching them how to gather it. They help him find more, so he tells them they're doing well, and they end up gathering a ridiculous amount. They return to the guild, and Luna can't believe they were able to gather that much, saying it's only been half a day, and she gives them their reward. But a man named Dominic suddenly appears, and he wonders what the kids are doing in the guild, so Takumi explains that he's their companion. But Dominic thinks they shouldn't be there, saying they should leave, and he threatens Takumi. So the kids attack him, but Takumi tells them to stop, asking Luna if they're going to get punished, but she explains that they acted in self-defense. The guard joins them, but he realizes that the fight is over, and the kids start crying, telling Takumi not to leave them, so he cheers them up, saying he'll never abandon them. The guard wonders what happened, introducing himself as Captain Vault, so Takumi tells him that Dominic started it, saying the kids cried because they thought he would abandon them. Vault thinks he's cruel, wondering why the kids would think he's going to leave them. So he explains that he doesn't know, but he mentions that he found them in the forest of Gaia, thinking they must have been abandoned. He wonders if carriages have been attacked around the forest, so Luna tells him about a slave trader group from the Algo Kingdom, which was attacked by monsters in the forest. Vault thinks the kids were dropped by the carriage to serve as decoys, and he praises Takumi for looking after them. But Luna asks him if he has materials from the forest of Gaia, so he tells her about the items dropped by the Red Wolves, and he sells it to her, as Vault explains that she's crazy about materials. He tells Takumi about the expedition, saying the soldiers head to the forest of Gaia to slaughter monsters, because they could threaten the city if their numbers aren't kept in check. But he explains that it's an A-rank forest, so he can only bring the best soldiers with him, and he invites Takumi to join them. But he refuses, saying he's still at rank F, but Vault reminds him that he was able to defeat Red Wolves, so this shouldn't be a problem for him. Vault talks to the guildmaster, telling him he wants Takumi to join the expedition, but the guildmaster can't believe he wants a newcomer to join them, so he explains that there's something special about him. A few days later, we see that Takumi has adjusted to life in Ateldia, and the kids are starting to interact with strangers. They've been sticking to a regular schedule, and they're enjoying their lives, but as Takumi eats bread, he realizes it isn't as good as the ones he's used to eating, so he decides to bake the breads from his world. They head to a bakery, where the shopkeeper Michelle asks him what he needs. But he reveals that he isn't interested in buying anything, and he just wants to ask a favor. So she introduces him to her father Rode, and he tells Rode to bake bread for him. He shows him the ingredients, telling him to put them inside the bread before baking it, and Rode reveals that he has never done this before, so Takumi decides to teach him how to do it. He demonstrates how to make the bread, as Rode realizes it's easier than he thought, and he tries making it himself, as Takumi tells him it's perfect. He tells Takumi to help him bake the bread, and he agrees to this, so they start baking, as the kids do their part, and after a few moments, the bread is finally ready to eat. Rode takes a bite, and he realizes it tastes amazing, thinking about selling it to his customers, so he offers to pay Takumi for coming up with the idea. But he explains that he doesn't need money, saying he just wants the bread to be available at the bakery, and he notes that he copied the idea from the bakers in his world, so he doesn't want to take credit. Rode thinks about experimenting with other fillings, and Takumi asks the kids about the bread, so they tell him it's delicious, saying they want more. The next day, Luna tells Takumi that he has been promoted to rank E, and he realizes he's already at level 13. She asks him if he wants to go to the labyrinth, telling him where he can find it, as she mentions that it has 15 floors, and the adventurers visit it to hunt monsters. He decides to check it out, and she tells him he won't be able to conquer it in one day. But he explains that he just wants to explore the first floor, reminding her he's just an E-rank adventurer, so he won't survive if he goes too far. But after some time, we see Takumi and the kids in the labyrinth, and we learn that they're already at the third floor. He notes that the kids are showing him the way, and this makes navigating the labyrinth easier, but he finds them mysterious, wondering how they know the right path. He realizes that the place is called the Earth Labyrinth, but a mole suddenly blocks their path, so the kids beat it up, but its body disappears, and they wonder why this happened. So Takumi reveals that monsters in labyrinths disappear when they're defeated, but they leave items in their place, and they realize that the mole dropped a whisker, but they all think it's useless. They head deeper into the labyrinth, and Takumi decides to call it a day, saying it's time for dinner, so he brings out his magical stove, using it to cook their meal, and they enjoy the food together as the kids have a great time before sleeping in their tent. They continue their journey, eliminating the monsters in their path, and after a few days, they reach the 10th floor, where they see a treasure chest. Takumi thinks it could contain a rare item, and the kids open it, realizing it contains 2 potions. One of them restores mana, while the other one replenishes stamina, but he knows they're just low-ranked items, so they aren't worth much. A monster suddenly appears, so the kids eliminate it, and it drops its skin, as he mentions that it's quite rare. He notes that the kids are amazing, because they're extremely effective when it comes to dealing with monsters, and he thinks they're gifted with superhuman instincts. So he's glad they weren't found by someone who could exploit them, thinking this is the reason why Sifril was worried about them. But a snake approaches them, and Takumi checks its stats, realizing it's venomous, so he tells the kids to stand back, thinking this is the perfect chance to try his throw skill. He hurls a rock with incredible force, and it blinds the snake, as he uses his wind cutter skill, which slices it into pieces. But giant bees suddenly appear, and the kids struggle to hit them, so they use the throw skill, but the bees fly away, and he's surprised that they also have that skill. As they continue to pursue the monsters, he checks out his inventory, and he thinks about the slime jelly, wondering if it's actually useful. The kids finally defeat the monsters, and they drop honey, as he notes that it's rare, so he thinks hunting bees is a good idea. He prepares a meal, as the kids help him out, and he decides to use honey to enhance the flavor. They start eating together, thinking the food is delicious, but a group of bees suddenly approach them, so he uses his skills to eliminate them. But the kids see another group approaching, so they decide to help, and they're happy that they were able to gather more honey. They finally reach the 15th floor, where they see a giant door, thinking the final boss is waiting inside. They decide to check it out, but the door suddenly closes, as a giant worm appears. Takumi realizes it's the final boss, and they can't escape unless they defeat it. He tells the kids to let him handle it, and he uses his wind cutter, but the boss dodges it, and it starts attacking him with sand orbs. But he destroys them with his air bullets, and he fires his wind arrow, which is able to kill the boss. He can't believe he was able to defeat it so easily, thinking Sifril gave him overpowered skills, and he takes the loot, as the kids praise him for working hard. A door opens, and they see a teleportation device which can send them back to the top floor. They open a treasure chest, and they see fire bombs inside, as Takumi notes that it works like a grenade, but he sees the kids playing with it, so he takes them away, telling them it's dangerous. They use the teleportation device, and they're transported outside the labyrinth, but they see a strange wolf, as Takumi notes that it looks dangerous. But it starts wagging its tail, and he notes that the kids didn't attack it, so he thinks it must be friendly. He checks its stats, realizing it's an S-rank beast, and he's surprised that it has a contract with him, thinking Sifril is behind this. He tries issuing orders, and it obeys him, as the kids take a liking to it, saying it looks cute. They tell him he should name it, so he decides to call it Jewel, and the kids think it's a great name. They're about to return to the city, but Takumi knows that the villagers will panic if they see Jewel, so he hides it in his shadow, as he explains that he can summon it as needed. They head to the chapel, where Takumi asks Sifril if he sent Jewel, but he denies this, thinking the god of water was behind it. He decides to give him another contracted beast, telling him to go to the grassland outside town in the morning. But Takumi wonders why the god of water sent Jewel to him, and Sifril thinks he wanted to thank him. So Takumi believes it's because he's taking care of the kids, thinking they must be related to the god of water. He receives a gift from the gods, and Sifril tells him to accept it, but he hesitates, so Sifril warns him he's going to receive divine punishment if he refuses, so he ends up accepting it. The next day, they head to the grassland Sifril mentioned, and two creatures appear as they realize they have new companions. One of them is an A-rank monster called a Thunderhawk, which specializes in high-speed attacks, and the other one is a Heavenly Tiger, which is an S-rank monster that has the power to control wind. The kids tell Takumi to name them, so he decides to name the Tiger Feet and the Hawk Bolt. He mentions that the gods gave him collars, so he makes the beasts wear it, as he reveals that Jewel and Feet's collars have the ability to make them shrink. He realizes that he can disguise them as his pets while he's in the city, but the kids also want to wear the collars, so he tells them it's only for animals. But this makes them sad, so he searches his inventory, and he realizes that the gods gave him necklaces, so he gives it to them. We learn that it grants resistance to physical and magical attacks, and it even has a tracing ring attached to it, which displays their location on the map. He sees magic bags in his inventory, and he lets them have it, telling them they can use it to store items. He tells everyone it's time to return to the city, so he orders Bolt to hide in his shadow, as the other beasts disguise themselves as his pets. We see them walking around the city when Elena sees a store with cute items, so they decide to check it out, and Takumi sees ribbons, so he buys them for her. She looks at herself in the mirror, and she likes it, so he tells her there's more, showing her the other colors. She wants the black one, and he wonders why she picked it, so she tells him it's because it's the same color as his hair, so the shopkeeper thinks she really loves him. He buys it, and he asks Alan if he wants anything, but he isn't interested in cute items. The shopkeeper asks for a favor, saying she wants the kids to wear her clothes, and they cooperate, as she realizes that they're extremely cute. He asks her if she made them herself, so she reveals that she's a tailor, and she always wanted kids to wear the clothes she made. He realizes that they like the ones they're wearing, so he decides to buy it, as she mentions that it looks great on them. That evening, we see them resting in the inn, as Takumi notes that he wants to buy something for Alan. He thinks about the toys he wanted when he was a child, but he knows they don't exist in this world, so he doesn't know what he should buy. The next day, everyone prepares for the first monster hunting expedition, and Takumi meets Vault, who realizes that he brought the kids with him. So he explains that they're his party members, and they need to complete the quest together. Vice Captain Isaac greets them, knowing Vault forced them to accept the quest, so he apologizes for Vault's behavior, thinking he's hopeless. But Takumi thinks the expedition will be a good experience for them, and Isaac can't believe the kids are adventurers, but Vault tells him not to worry, because they're skilled fighters. But they're afraid of him, so Takumi explains that they get nervous when they're around people, telling them everything's going to be okay. Vault tells them they're going to use carriages to head to the forest of Gaia, but Takumi suddenly senses a strange presence, realizing someone is watching them, and he thinks the person wants to hurt them. They arrive at the forest, where Vault tells everyone they're going to split into 3 squads. He tells Takumi he should meet the other adventurers in the expedition, and a man named Rudolph introduces himself, saying he's a member of the Dragon Breath. Vault reveals that he's an A-rank adventurer, and Takumi is honored to work with him. They start walking around the woods, and the kids sense a monster approaching, so Takumi warns Vault that they're about to get attacked, but Vault doesn't believe him because he doesn't see anything. Rudolph tells his companion Gilm to use his detect skill, but he doesn't see anything, and we learn that the skill allows the users to detect the magic of creatures around them. But the kids use a skill called Perception, which allows them to sense anything with harmful intentions, and the area of effect is wider, which explains why Gilm can't see the monster yet. He realizes that the kids are right, so he warns everyone they're about to get attacked, and they prepare for battle, as a red wolf appears. But the kids charge in, and they beat it up, as Takumi realizes that he forgot to tell them to stay put. Everyone's surprised by how strong they are, and he tells them they did a great job, but he asks them to let him fight the monsters next time. Vault asks him how the kids were able to defeat a red wolf, and he reveals that he found them in the forest of Gaia. Everyone's surprised to hear this, realizing they were able to survive by themselves, and he explains that he doesn't know how they were able to do it, but they were already strong when he met them. They head deeper into the forest, and the kids see a strange plant, as Isaac explains that it's used as an ingredient for a drug. So Vault decides to gather them, but Isaac stops him, telling him the spore will burst if he touches it, and he's going to get a rash. A knight reveals that Isaac always runs his mouth whenever Vault does something wrong, and Takumi finishes gathering the plants, but he realizes that Isaac isn't done yet, so he decides to help Vault. He tells the kids his plan, and they give Isaac the plant, so he thanks them, and Vault uses the opportunity to get away. A group of orcs suddenly appear, and Takumi tells them he will defeat an orc, but Vault thinks he can't do it alone. The orcs charge in, and he uses his wind cutter, slicing one of them in half, as the others fight the orcs. They're able to secure victory, but Vault wonders how he was able to one-shot an orc, because he's the only one who was able to do it, reminding him that he's just an F-rank adventurer. He explains that he's already at rank E, but Vault still thinks it's too low, telling Rudolph to talk to the guild master after they return, so that they can help him raise his rank. Isaac realizes that the monsters are behaving strangely, because monster groups are usually found at the deeper parts of the forest. So he thinks something's wrong, saying it's best to proceed with caution. They decide to take a break, and Takumi gives the kids bread, as Vault recognizes it, knowing only 20 of them are baked in a day, and no one knows when it's sold, so he wonders why Takumi has them. So he explains that Road made it for them, and Vault asks the kids if he can have a bite, but they refuse, so he becomes sad. Takumi decides to share his bread with everyone, and they enjoy the food, thinking it's delicious. After the meal, they're ready to continue their journey, as he realizes that eating the bread got them fired up. They see a red flare, realizing another squad is asking for help, and everyone rushes to get to them. But Takumi realizes they can't afford to waste time, so he takes the kids, and he uses his Accelerate skill, which allows them to travel with ridiculous speed. They see a group of knights surrounded by wolves, realizing they're in danger, so he equips his water katana, using it to slice the wolves in half, as the kids beat the rest up. Vault arrives with the others, realizing the wolves have been wiped out, and he's surprised that Takumi is so powerful, because he looks like a wimp. But the kids are upset, so Isaac tells them to attack Vault if he does something funny, and everyone laughs at him. But Takumi and the kids suddenly get the strange feeling again, thinking someone wants to kill them. That evening, we see the knights preparing dinner, but Takumi realizes they have no idea what they're doing, and Vault tells him they can't cook. He thinks about the kids, and he doesn't want them to eat trash, so he decides to help the knights, giving them instructions on how to prepare the food. The meal is finally ready, and everyone tastes it, realizing it's delicious, so they think he's amazing. The next day, Takumi makes breakfast for everyone, and the knights enjoy it, but he suddenly senses someone watching them again. They continue their journey, as Vault mentions that he's convinced the forest isn't normal, and the third Captain Farius thanks Takumi for saving his squad from the wolves. Vault thinks it's strange that they encountered monster groups in the shallow part of the forest, and Farius adds that they're seeing less monsters as they head deeper, saying this isn't usually the case. Takumi and the kids are distracted, because they still feel the person watching them, and everyone sees a giant snake, recognizing it as an evil viper. It starts attacking them, and the knights struggle against it, but Farius uses his earth magic to imprison it. Rudolph realizes it's the reason why the monsters are behaving strangely, and the wounded knights retreat, as everyone gets into position. It manages to break free, and the adventurers charge in, but they realize that they can't break through its skin, because it's resistant to both physical and magical attacks. The viper smashes the ground, as Vault realizes that it could crush them to death, and it sees that the injured knights are defenseless, so it goes after them. Takumi uses his wind cutter to destroy a tree, blocking its path, and the other adventurers blast it with their spells, but it doesn't work, so he wonders how they can defeat it. He notices the kids clinging to the viper, and it sees them, as he realizes they're in danger. So he takes a knife from his inventory, and he throws it, stabbing the viper's eye. But he suddenly gets the strange feeling again, and he realizes that the kids are distracted because of it. They end up getting hit, so he becomes upset, telling Rudolph to buy time for him, because he plans to use advanced wind magic. Rudolph agrees to do it, so he fights the viper, as Takumi prepares to use his spell, wondering how much magic he needs, because he just wants to use the right amount to defeat the viper. He finishes preparing his spell, so he orders everyone to retreat, as he unleashes his wind edge skill, which crashes into the viper, creating a powerful shockwave that slices it into pieces. Everyone's surprised by how powerful it is, and as the dust settles, he realizes the fight is over, but the trees in the area have been cut down, as he realizes that he used too much magic. Rudolph thanks him for saving everyone, saying the viper's blood is a valuable material, so he should gather as much as he can. He asks the kids if they're injured, so they tell him they're okay, and an adventurer named Iris tells him they only suffered minor scratches. So he realizes that their bodies are incredibly durable, because the viper's attack is strong enough to kill a person in one hit. He senses someone staring at them again, and he approaches a knight, taking him down and telling him not to move. Vault asks Takumi what he's doing, recognizing the knight as Sages. He explains that he didn't do anything, but Takumi knows he's lying because he was giving out a strong killing intent while he was staring at them. So Rudolph becomes upset, knowing the kids got hit because they were distracted by his gaze. But he blames Takumi for stealing Vault from him, so Takumi becomes confused, and Isaac explains that he's in love with Vault. So Takumi realizes that Sages was staring at him because he's jealous, and Vault mentions that he's straight, but Sages still wants to be with him. Isaac apologizes for getting Takumi involved, saying they will punish Sages for him, but he explains that he isn't angry because the kids only suffered minor injuries. Everyone tells him they're hungry, so he prepares food for them, and as they enjoy the meal, he checks his stats, realizing he has reached level 25 and learned water magic, wondering how he acquired it. Vault apologizes for what happened, and the kids invite him to sit with them, so he realizes they have finally warmed up to him. He tells Takumi that he has decided to end the expedition, saying it's too dangerous to continue because several knights have been injured. He explains that they'll be leaving the next day, and he tells Takumi that he has completed his quest, so he can claim his reward from the Adventurers Guild. The kids mention that they had fun, so Vault thinks about inviting them to join the expedition again, but Takumi tells them he wants to take a break. The next day, Takumi returns to the Adventurers Guild, where Luna tells him she's been waiting for him, and takes him to the Guildmaster. The Guildmaster introduces himself as Johann, and he explains that Vault and Rudolph told him to reconsider Takumi's rank. He thinks Takumi is stronger than he looks, so he decides to make him an A-rank adventurer, because he was able to defeat an evil viper. But Johann explains that he can't make the kids A-rank adventurers, because the other high rankers might become upset. He thinks this will be a problem for Takumi, because he can't accept high-ranking quests while he's with them, and he recalls that the rank of the party is determined by the average rank of its members. So he suggests raising the kids' ranks to D, so that his party rank will reach C, and Johann thinks it's a good idea. Luna takes their guild cards, but she asks Takumi if he was able to clear the Earth Labyrinth, and he realizes that his card recorded it. She can't believe he was able to clear it in a few days, saying it's a record speed. But he knows he was only able to do this because of the kids, and he tells her to keep it a secret because he doesn't want his party to attract too much attention. She gives them their rewards for joining the expedition, and they're about to leave, but she asks him if he was able to gather materials from the monsters he defeated. She takes him to a warehouse, where he shows her the remains of the evil viper, but he mentions that he wants to keep some of the materials it dropped. She explains that the guild wants 2/3 of the materials, so he decides to take 1/3 of the meat and skin, saying the guild can have the rest. He shows her the other items he gathered with the kids, and she offers to buy all of it. The kids are upset, but he calms them down, telling her she can buy the items, and she thanks them for gathering it, so the kids start feeling better. Takumi is exhausted, so he decides to rest in the inn, as the kids watch over him, knowing he deserves a break for looking after them. We see Takumi resting in a field, as he sees the kids playing with the beasts, and they try to teach them how to communicate, because they want to be able to talk to them. He teaches the kids how to count coins, as he tells them about the different coins used in this world. We learn that 10 copper coins is equivalent to a large copper, and 10 large coppers make a silver. He tells them to give him 54, so they take 5 large coppers and 4 copper coins, and he tells them they got the right answer. He gives them a simple math problem, and they're able to solve it, so he thinks they're ready to go shopping. They head to the market, where they meet a fruit vendor, and Alan tells her he wants to buy 5 cherry fruits. She mentions that it costs 35, so he gives her the exact amount, and Elena pays her 30 for 5 apples. She's impressed that the kids can count money at such a young age, thinking Takumi must have raised them properly, and he puts the fruits in his inventory. They head to a bookstore, where Takumi thinks about learning how to use his water skills, and he opens a book, as he tells the kids that it contains letters. He asks them if they want to learn how to read, and they tell him they're interested, so a woman approaches them, telling them she has books they can use for reading practice. They thank her for her help, and she realizes they have good manners, saying Takumi must have taught them well, and he's happy to hear everyone praising him because he feels like he's being a good guardian to the kids. The next day, they accept a quest from the guild, and they need to find a missing cat named Mina to complete it. Luna tells them they have 2 days to do it, and they head to the spot where Mina disappeared, as Takumi mentions that she's a black cat with white paws. He summons his beasts, saying he needs their help, and they start searching around the city, as they find several cats, but Mina is nowhere to be found. He asks the kids if they should just give up, but they're determined to find her, and they decide to search a certain spot, where they finally see her. He tells the kids that she's going to get scared if they approach too quickly, so they slowly walk to her, telling her not to be afraid, but we see that she's frightened. So they show her their necklace, which calms her down, and she starts warming up to them. Takumi checks her collar and confirms her identity, as he realizes that she's hungry, so he feeds her using the milk from his inventory. They return Mina to her owner, who is waiting at the guild, and Takumi tells the kids it's time to go home. But they want to continue searching around the city, so he asks Luna if she has other quests available. She explains that she has one, but it isn't suitable for children, because they need to kill goblins to complete it. She mentions that they have been attacking a nearby village and causing trouble for everyone, but the adventurers haven't accepted the quest, because they won't get paid enough for completing it. He asks the kids if they want to take the goblins out, and they decide to accept the quest. So they make their way to the village, and Takumi orders Jewel and Feet to disguise themselves as his pets. He walks to the guards, as he explains that they're adventurers from the city of Shireen, and their quest is to eliminate the goblins. So a guard leads them to the chief, as he mentions that everyone's on high alert because the goblins have been attacking them several times a day. Takumi and the kids meet the chief, who thanks them for accepting the quest, but he asks them if they have other companions because he thinks the goblins will destroy them. So Takumi realizes they look weak, and he shows the chief his guild card, telling him he's an A-rank adventurer, so the goblins shouldn't be a problem for them. A villager reports that the goblins have arrived, and Takumi promises to get rid of them, but the chief wonders why the kids will be joining him, so he explains that it's easier to protect them if they're close to him. The goblins break through the gate, and one of them prepares to attack a woman, but Takumi shoots him with his air bullet. He orders the villagers to run for shelter, and the kids prepare to fight as his beasts approach him. So he thinks they want to help, and he tells them they can fight, but they need to stay in their current forms. We see the goblins getting absolutely destroyed as their leader appears, and Takumi checks its stats, realizing it's called a goblin soldier. He thinks it looks dangerous, and he decides to take it on, but the kids beat it up, and he sees that the goblins have been wiped out, realizing he was useless during the fight. Jewel suddenly starts talking, as they realize that he can use telepathy, and he explains that he was able to learn it after he defeated the goblins. He calls Takumi his master, but he tells Jewel to call him by his name, and he realizes that Feet and Bolt have also learned to use telepathy. The kids are glad that the beasts have finally learned to communicate, and Takumi recalls that they tried to teach the beasts how to talk, so he tells them they did great. They see a house on fire, realizing the goblins were behind it, and he thinks it's the perfect chance to test his water magic. We learn that he's been reading about the basics of magic, so he's confident that he'll be able to use it, and he tries to launch a water ball, but it fails to reach its target. He wonders what went wrong, and he decides to try again, creating 2 water balls, but he still ends up failing. He tells Jewel to extinguish the fire, so he launches a huge ball to put it out, and Takumi becomes depressed, realizing he needs to work on improving his magic, but the kids cheer him up. The villagers thank them for eliminating the goblins, and they receive their reward, before returning to the inn. He thinks the kids must be tired, but they tell him to read a book for them, and he starts telling them about the fish in the ocean. But they have no idea what he's talking about, as he realizes that they have never seen the ocean before. The next day, Takumi tells Vault that they're leaving Shireen, because he wants to explore the world with the kids. Isaac asks him where they're going, so he reveals that he's planning to visit the seaside town of Bailey, and Vault knows that it's still within the kingdom. We learn that Vault and Isaac are relieved that Takumi isn't leaving the kingdom, because they know he's a force to be reckoned with, so they don't want him to end up on the enemy's side. They know that the kids are also overpowered, and Vault never gets tired of watching them, because they're always full of surprises. Takumi and the kids say goodbye to everyone, and Luna asks him if they're going to meet again, so he thinks she likes him, but she explains that she just wants him to return with rare materials. Rhoda and Michelle tell him they'll be lonely without him, and he asks them if they can make bread for him before he leaves. Rhoda agrees to do it, so Takumi gives him instructions, as Michelle wonders where he keeps getting his ideas. They return to the tailor, who gives the kids new clothes, and Takumi asks her how much it costs, but she tells him to think of it as a parting gift. They go to the chapel, where Takumi prays to Sifril, telling him they're going to Bailey because he wants to show the kids the ocean. Sifril thinks it's a great idea, and he promises to pray to him once they reach Bailey. They're about to leave, but a man stops them, telling Takumi to give the kids back, because they're his merchandise. We learn that he's a slave trader, and his wagon was attacked while he was passing through the forest of Gaia, so he decided to use the kids as bait. Takumi knows that slavery exists in Ateldia, and the slaves are marked with magic to prove their status, but the kids don't have marks on them. The cops arrive, and the man tells them to arrest Takumi because he stole his goods. So they ask him what Takumi stole from him, and he tells them it's the kids, but Takumi tells him to prove it, saying they're his siblings, and he mentions that they don't have slave marks. So he thinks the man is lying, and he accuses him of trying to kidnap the kids. Vault suddenly arrives with Isaac, and the man ends up getting arrested, because they testified that the kids are Takumi's siblings. Isaac gives him an invitation from the Lord of Bailey, and he reveals that they know each other, telling Takumi to ask for the Lord's help if he runs into trouble. He asks the kids if they're ready to go, and they say goodbye to Vault and Isaac, as Takumi thanks them for their help. We see Takumi traveling with the kids, as he notes that they're sad because of the slave trader, so he wants to cheer them up. He decides to pass through the forest of Gaia, and he summons his beasts, telling Jewel and Feet that they need a ride. He orders Bolt to scout the area, because he doesn't want people to see them riding S-rank beasts, and they head deeper into the forest, as they encounter a blood bear. So the beasts get rid of it, and the kids praise them, but Takumi tells them they're dirty now, so he uses his washing spell, which cleans them in an instant. They start playing with the kids, as he notes that they're feeling better, and after they leave the forest, they decide to set up camp. He asks the kids what they want for dinner, so they tell him they want cream bread, but he tells them they should save it for their snack tomorrow, and he asks them if they want a yakadon, but they have no idea what it is, so he tells them it's rice with egg on top, and they're excited to see what it looks like. So he cooks it, and they realize that it looks different from what they were expecting, but they decide to eat it anyway, and they find it delicious. As they rest in a tent, Takumi stares at the night sky, and he sees 2 moons, as he notes that Ateldia has 3 moons with different colors, but only 2 are visible at this time of the year. He notes that he has been in the world for 2 months, and he recalls the moments he spent with the kids, as he falls asleep. The next day, they continue their journey, and they reach the ocean, as the kids realize that it's enormous. They start playing, and Takumi tells them the water is salty, so they ask him if it's delicious, wondering if they can drink it. So he tells them they can't, but he explains that they can use their fingers to taste it. They decide to give it a try, and they realize it's too salty. They start playing with the beasts, as he notes that they're having fun, but he hears a voice, so he looks around, and he sees a girl in the water, thinking she's drowning. So he checks his inventory, trying to look for an item he can use to save her, but she introduces herself as Milena, telling him she's a mermaid. But he doesn't believe her, so he checks her stats, realizing she's telling the truth, and she mentions that a retainer of the water god told her about him. The kids ask him who she is, so he tells them she's a mermaid, and they greet her, as she reveals that she knows who they are. She explains that her village has a problem, and someone told them that he can solve it. So she asks him if he's willing to help them, telling him to go to their underwater village, but he thinks he's going to drown. But she tells him not to worry, and she gives them bracelets, so he checks its stats, realizing it allows them to breathe underwater. So he decides to help her, telling his beasts to hide in his shadow, and the kids wear the bracelets. Milena leads them to her village, as Takumi realizes that the bracelets are incredibly useful, because it prevents them from getting wet, and it even allows them to talk underwater. She tells him the monsters in the area are weak, and they encounter a creature called a hammerfish, so the kids charge in, kicking it away, as he notes that they can fight underwater. A sand crab appears, so the kids rush in, and they easily defeat it, as Milena realizes they're incredibly strong. The group dives deeper, and they eventually reach her village, as the kids mention that it's beautiful. Takumi notes that it's filled with crystals called prismarines, and he checks its stats, realizing that it conceals the power of the ocean within. She reveals that their village is called the Azure Palace, and she promises to show them around, but she leads them to a sunken ship, telling them it's blocking a cave where they grow coral. She explains that everyone in the village tried to move it, but it's too heavy, and the water god's retainer told them that Takumi can solve their problem. He promises to take care of it, and he puts it in his inventory, so she thanks him for his help. The villagers arrive, and they enter the cave, as she explains that they need the coral to make medicine, so they can't afford to lose it. She takes Takumi and the kids to the High Priestess, who welcomes them to the Azure Palace, and everyone thinks she's beautiful. She explains that she's honored to meet Takumi, because the retainer of the god of water called him a savior, and Milena tells her that he solved the ship problem, so she calls him a hero. She introduces him to the Chief Galdo, who thanks him for his help, and he wonders if she's the master of the Azure Palace. But she explains that she's just holding an honorary position, which is passed down to the person with the best affinity with God, and its only function is to serve as a symbol of sanctity. She decides to give him a reward, asking him what he wants, and he recalls that he still can't control his water ball, so he tells her he wants to learn water magic with the kids. Galdo volunteers to teach them, but she mentions that it won't be the reward, and she promises to give him something, but he refuses to accept it. So Milena comes up with an idea, and the High Priestess thinks it's brilliant, so she tells him they're going to give him something that has no value to them, but she thinks it will prove useful for him. They take him to a cave filled with items, and he checks them out, as he mentions that he finds them interesting. The kids find pearls, and he thinks it looks perfect, but the High Priestess reveals that they're in a landfill, and he can't believe the items are trash, because pearls are worth a fortune. But she explains that they see it every day, and she knows that humans love it, so she wants to give it to him. He accepts the reward, and they decide to spend the night in the Azure Palace, where Milena serves them food, telling them to eat as much as they like. They watch the performers as they enjoy their meals, as Takumi notes that he feels like an old man, and he imagines what the kids will look like once he gets old, but he freaks out, and he starts crying, thinking it's too soon. The next day, we see Takumi and the kids on an island, where Galdo teaches them how to utilize mana, telling them it's used to create and control magic. He explains that it's easier to use earth and wind magic while they're on land, because they just need to control the elements around them, but for water and fire magic, the element needs to be created first. He tells them to try using the water around them to cast magic, and Takumi creates a water pillar, as Galdo tells him he's doing well. But he knows that the kids have never used magic, so he lets his mana flow into them, and they realize it feels warm. He explains that they also have mana, and Takumi tells them to find the warmth in their bodies, so they follow his advice, and they're able to control their mana. Galdo teaches them how to create a water ball, and they're able to do it on their first attempt, so everyone's impressed, because it usually takes hours for people to learn the skill. Galdo tells Takumi to hit a boulder with his water ball, so he follows the instructions, and he's able to break it. The kids follow suit, and Galdo can't believe they were able to destroy the boulders. He decides to leave them on the island, as they continue to train all day, but after some time, they notice something strange, and a massive creature comes out of the water. We cut to Sephiroth, as he reprimands the water god's retainer Maya, because she told the mermaids that Takumi can solve their problem, telling her to stop relying on him, so she apologizes for her behavior. Sephiroth enjoys a cup of tea, as his servant asks him if he's angry because Takumi got involved. So he explains that he wants to support him, because he feels guilty for killing him, but the servant mentions that Takumi appears to be in trouble. We return to Takumi, as a Leviathan appears, and it starts talking to him, calling him the retainer of the god of wind. The Leviathan mentions that the kids are the children of the water god, and his mission is to protect them, but he couldn't follow them to the human world, because he knows that the humans will panic if they see him. He tells Takumi to name him, so that he can summon him after they form a contract, and he decides to call him Kaiser. A light suddenly appears, and Kaiser explains that they have formed a contract, but he suddenly tells the kids to come with him, promising to keep them safe. But they refuse to leave Takumi, and Kaiser reveals that he was just testing them, saying he's glad that they were able to build a great relationship. Takumi promises to protect the kids, and Kaiser knows that he's from another world, so he offers to help him with his knowledge, saying he has lived for a long time. He tells Takumi to talk to him if he needs help, and Kaiser gives him a scale, telling him to keep it because it contains his mana, so he can use it to find him. He tells them to get on his back, and he takes them to the Azure Palace as they enjoy the ride, realizing the ocean is beautiful. They arrive at the palace, and Kaiser bids them farewell, as Takumi asks the kids if they're okay with him, but they tell him they just want to continue their adventure. They return to the High Priestess, who thinks they're tired, so she invites them to rest in the palace, but Takumi tells her they need to go. She realizes he has a busy schedule, and she gives him a lunchbox, telling him to enjoy the food during his trip. The kids say goodbye to the mermaids, and they make their way back to the shore, but they encounter a sand crab, so the kids beat it up, as Takumi thinks about cooking it. They see a labyrinth, and they decide to check it out, realizing there's a teleportation device at the starting point. Takumi checks his map, as he mentions that the labyrinth has 30 floors, and there are teleportation devices on every 10th floor. He thinks the kids are tired, but they tell him they're fine, so he decides to head to the 10th floor before calling it a day. They open the lunchbox, and they enjoy the food together before exploring the labyrinth. They see frogs on the first floor, and Takumi tells the kids to use magic because they will get poisoned if they touch the frogs. They attack using their water ball, but they end up missing, so Takumi tells them to try again, and they're able to defeat the frogs. They reach the second floor, and Takumi notes that a wall looks suspicious, so he pushes it, and they discover a hidden room. They see a treasure chest, which is full of shrimp, and the kids want to eat it, so he promises to cook it later, and he puts it in his inventory. They open other treasure chests, realizing they all contain food, and he takes all of them, as he notes that the labyrinth is full of surprises. They're about to enter the 6th floor, but Takumi tells the kids it's getting late, and he decides to make a crab hot pot. They tell him it's delicious, and he cooks the prawns, so the kids eat them before going to sleep. The next day, they see a clam on the 6th floor, and the kids are about to attack it, but Takumi stops them, telling them it will release a shockwave if it gets hit. So they destroy it with their water balls, and he checks their stats, realizing they're already at level 25, but he becomes worried, because he's still at level 27, thinking he will look bad if they surpass him. They tell him they found a party popper, and he shows them how to use it, but it makes an extremely loud noise, which scares the kids. They head deeper into the labyrinth, and they reach the 10th floor, where they're attacked by hundreds of monsters called arrowfish. But they easily defeat them, and the exit gate appears, as they realize that the monsters dropped countless items. Takumi takes all of them, but the kids tell him there's something underwater, so they decide to dive in, and they see a treasure chest, which contains a mermaid bracelet. He notes that it's similar to the ones they're wearing, and he wonders if it's a rare item, because it would be difficult to find. They go through the exit gate, and they see a teleportation device, as Takumi tells the kids it's time to head to the city of Bailey, so they teleport to the 1st floor. The following day, they reach the city of Bailey, as Takumi recalls that Isaac gave him a letter, but he decides to explore the city first. He meets a merchant that sells scallops, and he decides to buy 3 of them. He uses butter and soy sauce as seasoning, and the kids taste it, telling him it's amazing. The merchant reveals that he doesn't know what a soy sauce is, so Takumi tells him it's the sap of a tree, asking him if he wants to have a bite. So he tastes the food, and he can't believe how delicious it is, as the villagers become curious. He asks Takumi if he can buy the soy sauce and butter, and he agrees to it, so the man uses them to add flavor to his scallops. His customers love it, so there's a huge line to buy it, but he runs out of ingredients. He mentions that this is the first time he was able to draw such a large crowd, and he decides to go on a journey to find soy sauce. Takumi and the kids visit a blacksmith, asking him if he can polish Kaiser's scale, and he immediately realizes that it contains mana. Takumi explains that he wants to make it easier to carry, so the man calls his assistant Rudy, telling him to turn the scale into an accessory. So he comes up with a design, and Takumi and the kids love it, but he explains that they need mithril to serve as the frame, and it will make the product more expensive. But Takumi doesn't mind, and the blacksmith reveals that they have mithril in the shop. Takumi wants to turn the chain into a leather string, but Rudy explains that they would need the thread of a mithril spider, and the blacksmith mentions that it's extremely rare. But Takumi recalls that he has it in his inventory, so he shows it to them, and they can't believe what they're seeing. He tells Rudy to make 3 pendants because he also wants the kids to wear it, and Rudy explains that he doesn't get to work with rare materials often, so he offers to vary the design, and Takumi thinks it's a great idea. He asks the blacksmith if he can craft equipment using the evil viper's skin, but he freaks out again because he can't believe Takumi has it. He realizes that Takumi is an A-rank adventurer, and he asks him what he wants to make, so he explains that he wants a leather armor set. But the man wonders why he prefers leather over metal, so he explains that Bolt stabs his arm when he lands on it. Alan mentions that he also wants Bolt to land on his arm, so Takumi decides to order equipment for him as well. They leave the store, and they head to the chapel, where Takumi talks to Sephiroth, telling him they were able to arrive safely. He now knows that the kids are the children of the water god, but he asks Sephiroth about their father, wondering why he isn't looking after them. Sephiroth falls silent, as Takumi wonders why he isn't saying anything about the water god, but he suddenly mentions that Takumi has just become his official disciple. He explains that disciples only become official when they're given something they symbolize, and Takumi wonders what he represents, so Sephiroth reveals that it's nurturing and education. He realizes that it's because of the kids, but he wonders why he doesn't symbolize anything connected to wind. So Sephiroth reveals that nurturing and education are Marianella's domain, saying it can't be helped, because Takumi received her blessings. He wonders what he needs to do now that he's an official disciple, and Sephiroth tells him he can just watch over the kids as usual. Sephiroth reveals that the fire god wants to give him items, because he wants to thank him for improving the cooking in Ateldia, revealing that Takumi's recipes have spread to other nations. Sephiroth explains that Ateldia's cooking hasn't changed for hundreds of years, and he mentions that the fire god is overjoyed to learn about Takumi's recipes, because cooking is his domain. Sephiroth adds that the fire god is going to give Takumi fire magic, as well as a contracted beast, and Takumi is happy hearing this. After that, Sephiroth realizes that he almost told Takumi about the water god, and we learn that he doesn't want to tell him the truth, because the water god had an affair with the kid's mother, and he got her pregnant. The fire god Salamantel asks Sephiroth what's wrong, revealing that he's been listening the entire time. He mentions that he got his best contracted beast ready for Takumi, and Sephiroth wonders what he's going to give him. We return to the kids, as they play with the beasts, and Takumi uses his water magic to create a slide for them. He thinks about using the opportunity to practice his water magic, but fire suddenly appears behind him as a massive lion makes its entrance. Takumi checks its stats, realizing it's his contracted beast, and he realizes it's from the god of flames. He tries talking to it, but it just roars, and Bolt tells him it doesn't have telepathy yet. The kids tell him to name it, so he decides to call it Vector, and it appears to like its name. He orders Vector to get smaller, and the kids start playing with him, as Takumi tells the other beasts to be friends with him. The kids play fetch with the beasts, but Vector runs past the coconut, and he returns with a girl, so Takumi freaks out, thinking he's trying to eat her, but he releases her, and everyone realizes she's just sleeping. Takumi checks her stats, realizing she's a demon named Vivienne, and he recalls that demons are treated like the other races in Ateldia, so he thinks she doesn't consider humans as her enemies. The kids are hungry, so he prepares food for everyone, and the girl wakes up, realizing that everyone's eating rice balls. He tells her to eat, and she realizes that the food tastes delicious, so she gobbles it up, and she thanks him for the meal. She introduces herself, and she asks the kids if he's their father, so they tell her he's like a brother to them. She reveals that she's a spy, and she was heading to a town called Albert, but she forgot to bring food, so she tried to hunt in the forest, but she ended up starving. He asks her why she didn't just head back, so she explains that she had to give her report, and she reveals that her mission was to spy on a man who was engaged to a noble. So she disguised herself as a maid, and she discovered that he was hiding a commoner girl in the mansion. She explains that she has to go, because she needs to give her report, and she thanks Takumi for the food, giving him potions to express her gratitude. He realizes that they're aphrodisiacs, and she reveals that she made them, saying they're super effective. She bids them farewell, and after she leaves, the kids ask Takumi what a father is, so he realizes that they don't know anything about families. So he tells them they were born because they have a mother and a father, saying being born is a wonderful thing. The next day, they head to the Adventurers Guild in Bailey, and they see a quest they can complete. Takumi tells the receptionist Karen that he wants to accept the quest, so she asks for his guild card, and she can't believe he's an A-rank adventurer, He shows her the items needed to complete the quest, and she checks his information, but she's shocked to learn that he was able to find a new labyrinth called Sazanami. He realizes that she's talking about the underwater labyrinth, and he explains that he found it by accident, but she tells him it's a big deal, and she causes a scene. So the guildmaster scolds her, telling her to apologize, because she isn't supposed to tell other adventurers about the content of Takumi's card, and she explains that she absolutely lost it, because it's her first time meeting someone who has discovered a new labyrinth. The guildmaster explains that they need to tell the provincial lord about Sazanami, and he asks Takumi how he found it. So he shows them the location, saying the entrance is underwater, and he suggests using a magical device that can help them breathe, because they need to hold their breath until they pass through the corridor. The guildmaster wonders how he was able to enter the labyrinth, and he thinks it will be difficult to explain the mermaid bracelets. So he just tells them he has confidence in his lung capacity, and Karen believes him, because he's an A-rank adventurer. The next day, they meet the Lord of Bailey named Cedric, and he reveals that he's Isaac's brother, as the kids mention that he looks like Isaac, so they immediately take a liking to him. Takumi explains how he found Sazanami, and Cedric thanks him for discovering it, because it will attract adventurers to Bailey. He thinks the city is going to flourish, because adventurers like to challenge new labyrinths, so they will stay in Bailey to explore Sazanami, and support the local establishments. The head of the scout team shows him the list of labyrinths in their kingdom, and he realizes that he needs to be careful, because they still haven't discovered many of the labyrinths he knows about. The man tells him he can have the map, explaining that his team was able to explore the first floor of Sazanami, but they struggled to make it past the entrance. Takumi wonders if there were casualties, but the man tells him they're fine, because they're excellent swimmers, and the guild even gave them windstones to help them breathe underwater. Cedric mentions that the kingdom will give Takumi a Medal of Honor, but he doesn't want it, wondering if everyone's going to learn about him, so Cedric realizes that he doesn't want to attract attention. He promises to make sure that nobody learns about Takumi, but he tells him to accept the medal. The man is about to leave, but Cedric asks him about what happened at the guild, so he immediately apologizes to Takumi, who realizes that Cedric learned about the incident, and the man promises that it won't happen again. Cedric reveals that he received a letter from Isaac, who told him about Takumi, so he was looking forward to his arrival. He tells the kids to enjoy their time in Bailey, and his servant tells him that lunch is ready, so he tells Takumi to join his family in the dining room, where he introduces Takumi to his wife Olivia, and his sons Theodore and Lattice. Olivia mentions that they also have a daughter, but she's too young to join them. The twins introduce themselves, but Takumi realizes they're shy, because it's their first time meeting other kids. They eat lunch together, and Takumi mentions that the food tastes delicious. Cedric reveals that Isaac told him about the new breads Takumi introduced in Shireen, and he's been boasting about how delicious they are. Cedric wants to learn the recipe, and Takumi agrees to share it with him, as Theodore mentions that he wants to taste the bread, but Takumi explains that he doesn't have enough for everyone. The twins tell him they want jelly, and they wonder what it is. So he explains that it's a dessert, and Cedric tells him they want to taste it. But Takumi explains that it has a strange ingredient, and he thinks they won't enjoy eating it. But they don't seem to mind, so he lets them try it, and they find it amazing, asking him how he made it. So the twins tell him it's made using slime, as Takumi explains that he mixed it with fruit juice and turned it into jelly. Cedric can't believe that slimes can be so tasty, and Takumi tells him Isaac hasn't tried it, so he decides to boast about it. He buys the recipe from Takumi, saying he will sell it in his shops, and he orders his servant to gather the ingredients. But he explains that it will take time, because slime jellies are so cheap that nobody bothers to pick them up. So Cedric decides to breed slimes, telling Takumi he can spend his night at the mansion while he's in Bailey. He explains that he has already booked a lodging, but Cedric tells him to cancel it, and Takumi realizes that it's hard to say no to him, so they decide to sleep in the mansion. The next day, Takumi and the kids tell Cedric they were able to sleep well, because the bed was incredibly soft. He reveals that he already received a reply from Isaac, and Takumi can't believe how fast they're able to send messages to each other. So he explains that they use a teleportation device at the guild, saying it can teleport items to faraway places. He mentions that Isaac appears to be upset, because he bragged about the jelly, revealing that his brother has a competitive side, so he enjoys teasing him, and Takumi realizes that he's fond of Isaac. We return to Shireen, where we see Isaac reading Cedric's letter as Vault asks him why he looks sad. He mentions that Takumi and the kids have arrived at Bailey and they have discovered a new labyrinth, so Vault is shocked, wondering how they were able to do it. Isaac adds that it will be reported to the kingdom, so the king will summon Takumi to the capital, and they recall that they wrote a report about his achievements in Shireen. So Vault thinks everyone's going to start talking about him, and Isaac is afraid that he might leave the country, thinking he's a valuable asset to the kingdom. They want to prevent this from happening, so Isaac suggests writing to the knights at the capital, and he mentions that he wants to taste Takumi's jelly, saying Cedric opened a new business with him. After some time, Cedric disguises himself as a commoner, and he invites Takumi and the kids to the market, saying he wants to try the new food that everyone's talking about. He takes them to the merchant who sells scallops, and he recognizes Takumi, telling him he doesn't need to fall in line, because he was the one who taught him the new recipe. They start enjoying the food, and Cedric mentions that it tastes amazing, saying he can't believe Takumi was the one who invented it. He asks Takumi about the soy sauce, so he explains that it's obtained from a tree that grows in the labyrinth, saying there are shops that sell it. So they decide to visit a trading company, which sells labyrinth items, and Cedric speaks to the chief of the company, as Takumi looks around. He sees red bean paste, and he tells the kids how it's made, saying it's a key ingredient for the bread he invented. Cedric returns with a paper bag, and Takumi sees a mark, thinking it looks familiar, and he recalls that he saw it on the sunken ship. So he asks Cedric if he knows about it, and the chief of the company mentions it's his boat. Takumi tells them he recovered it, so they become confused, thinking it's impossible, but he tells them he was able to do it using his inventory. He decides to return it, but Cedric asks him if he's going to do it without asking for payment, because in this world, the person who finds an item becomes its owner, and the previous owner can only get it back after he pays for it. The chief reveals that the ship was powered by a large fairy stone, which is extremely expensive, and he explains that he wants it back because he needs to make up for his losses. The kids ask Takumi why he's going to return it, so he explains that it's the right thing to do, and he wants them to follow his example if they find a lost item. We see everyone at the harbor, where Takumi removes the ship from his inventory, and the chief confirms that it belongs to him, so he thanks Takumi for returning it. After that, Takumi looks around the shop, where he sees coffee beans, and he decides to buy it, because he enjoys drinking coffee. He realizes that there are also spices, and he knows that the people use them to make medicine, but he decides to buy them to make curry. We see Takumi outside the mansion, as he teaches the kids how to make curry. He pours the ingredients into a pot, and the kids start mixing it, as Takumi adds apple and honey to the mixture. He mentions that they need to give it time to stew, but he uses time magic to accelerate the process, and the meal is ready in an instant. The kids taste it, saying it's delicious, and they see everyone watching them, as Takumi realizes that they were able to smell the food. Cedric wonders why the color is weird, so he explains that it's because of the medicinal herbs he used. He makes curry for everyone, and Theodore and Lattice think he's an excellent cook, so the twins agree with them, and he's glad that they're finally talking to each other. Cedric tells him the dish is perfect, and he can't stop talking about how delicious it is, so Takumi wonders if he accidentally placed a stimulant into the mixture. A chef named Ryan appears, revealing that he also tasted the curry, and he thinks it's wonderful, asking Takumi to take him as his apprentice. But Cedric tells Ryan that Takumi isn't a cook, so he isn't going to take an apprentice. After that, Theodore and Lattice ask Takumi about his adventures, so he tells them about the monsters he defeated while he was in Shireen, and they think he's amazing. They think it's dangerous for the twins to go with him, but he explains that they're strong, saying they can easily defeat the monsters they encounter. So Theodore and Lattice start praising them, but they hold on to Takumi, as he realizes that they can't handle the compliments. Takumi visits a bakery with the kids, where he teaches them how to bake, and he tells them to make bread using the ingredients they have. They work together, and they enjoy the experience, as Takumi notes that the twins have finally warmed up to Theodore and Lattice. They're able to come up with 3 different flavors, and the kids taste them, realizing they're all perfect. The baker takes a bite, and he tells Takumi it's incredible, saying he wants to be his apprentice, but Takumi rejects him. We see Takumi and the kids as they plan to visit a nearby mountain, and he summons his beasts, ordering Jewel and Feet to carry them. Vector wants Takumi to ride him, but Jewel tells him he can't, and they start arguing with each other. Takumi tells Vector that he will ride him some other time because he's afraid he's going to get thrown off. They climb the mountain, but they realize that the path is getting narrower, and Takumi tells Jewel and Feet that it will be easier to travel if they're smaller, so they transform into his pets. He realizes that Vector can't get any smaller, so he might have to stay there, but he destroys the trees in his path, as Takumi realizes that he doesn't have to worry about him. They decide to search for medicinal herbs, but the kids sense enemies approaching, and Takumi realizes that they're surrounded by bandits who are planning to kidnap the kids. Takumi tells everyone to go easy on them, and they prepare to fight, but Vector charges in, and he returns to his original size, crushing the bandits in an instant. Their leader tells them to fight on, but Vector knocks him out, so everyone praises him, saying he did a great job. We see that they were able to capture the bandits, and Takumi asks one of them about their hideout. But he refuses to answer, so Vector intimidates him, and he decides to cooperate. They enter a cave, and they see the bandits, so Vector beats them up, as Takumi realizes that he wants everyone to praise him. They search the hideout, and they see the goods stolen by the bandits, so Takumi puts them in his inventory, planning to ask Cedric what they should do with it. They see girls who are being held captive, and Takumi tells them they're going to be fine, because the bandits have been defeated. He sets them free, and they're glad it's all over, as Takumi thanks his beasts for their help. Vector suddenly talks to him, revealing that he has learned telepathy, and Takumi realizes that he leveled up after he defeated the bandits. He wants Takumi to praise him, as he promises to perform his duties, and everyone clings to Takumi, saying they will continue to do their part. Takumi and the kids head back to the blacksmith, where they pick up their pendants and equipment. The blacksmith is happy he was able to work with the evil viper's skin, and he notes that Takumi's glove is so a hawk can land on his arm, telling him to test it out. So Takumi calls out Bolt, and they're shocked to see him appear out of nowhere, and Rudy also recognizes it as a thunder hawk. The twins put on their new items, but as they walk through the city, Bolt seems to attract everyone's attention. They go to see Cedric, and he asks Takumi if he found a painting from the bandits, so he checks his inventory and pulls it out, but is shocked to see a woman, and he quickly covers it up from the twins. Cedric asks him if he's willing to sell it back to the owner, and he quickly agrees, telling him to put it away. After that, Takumi and the kids go back to the Azure Palace, and he asks the priestess for more mermaid bracelets so his summons can also be underwater. So they quickly prepare them, and Takumi heads back to the underwater labyrinth, teleporting back to the 10th floor. As they continue onto the 11th floor, they find that it's flooded, but thanks to their bracelets, they don't get wet. The kids are able to lead the way, and they eventually come across some monsters, but the twins easily deal with them and take them out with their water magic. They find a hidden room with a chest, and fight even more monsters along the way, but they decide to rest for the night. They make it to the 17th floor the next day, and Takumi notices that it's getting cold, so he gives the twins their cloaks. There's suddenly a giant bear that appears, and it's able to use magic, but Takumi counters it with his own water ball, and the kids beat it up. There's suddenly a giant turtle that appears, and it attacks them with bubbles. Takumi warns the kids not to touch them, because he knows they will explode, so he wonders how they can defeat the turtle. But he uses his inventory to suck up all the bubbles, and the turtle tries to run, but Takumi uses his water pillar to stop it, and the twins finish it off. As they continue deeper, the water level seems to rise, and they come across a swarm of alligators. But Vector is easily able to deal with them, and he rushes ahead, but ends up getting stuck. They eventually make it to the boss room, but when they go inside, they find themselves on a beach. There's suddenly a bright light, and there's a kraken that appears. It starts to attack them, so Takumi uses his wind cutter, but the kraken instantly regenerates. The twins also try attacking, but it doesn't work, so Takumi thinks they need to all attack it at the same time. So they all use their strongest attacks, causing a massive explosion, and the kraken is blown to pieces. They return to the boss room and find a treasure chest, which contains a fire-enchanted sword. After that, they head back to see Cedric, and his sons are excited to hear about their adventure. Cedric tells Takumi that there's someone there to see them, and we see that Isaac and Vault have come to visit. Takumi wonders what they're doing there, so Isaac reveals they came to get him. He explains they were on a mission in the capital when they heard about the discovery of the underwater labyrinth, so the king wants to meet him. He asks the kids if they're okay with going, and they're happy to follow him wherever he goes. So Isaac and Walt ask them to leave in the morning because they don't want to make the king wait, but Takumi sees that Theodore and Lattice are sad the twins are leaving so soon. So Takumi decides to make the most of their time and lets them play with the bubble from the turtle. Walt wonders why it doesn't explode, but Takumi mentions that they don't seem to burst after being put in his inventory. The twins tell Takumi to play with them, so they all join in and enjoy themselves for the rest of the day. At night, Takumi puts the twins to bed, and he goes to have a drink with the boys. Walt notes that the twins are glued to him, and Takumi thinks it's because they were treated so poorly before. He thinks about how they used to be afraid of strangers, but he thinks they have grown a lot since then. Cedric realizes Takumi isn't actually related to the kids, but Walt thinks it doesn't matter because they're still a family, and it brings a tear to Takumi's eye as he realizes that they really are his family. The next morning, they prepare to go, but the twins realize it means leaving their friends, so they say they don't want to go. Walt and Isaac think they will need to cancel the trip, but Takumi asks Cedric to look after the twins while he's gone. Walt wonders if he's sure, and he starts walking away, but the twins run after him, saying that they want to stay with him. Theodore and Lattice tell them they'll always be friends even if they're not together, and they promise they'll meet again, but the group heads off, and they begin their journey to the capital. But that's where this series ends for now. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.